Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are coming in from. This is Viveka von Rosen and Vengreso Live. And today I have with me my friend Wendy. Now, what's kind of funny is we first met on LinkedIn, as you do, messaging back and forth, inviting each other to connect. And I booked time on your calendar or you booked time on my calendar. So we got on the call and we're like, okay, because Wendy thought I had booked time with her and she thought I had, and who knows who booked time with who.
I don't know.
We're both like, okay, so why are we on this call?
Are you recording me or am I recording you?
Are we doing an interview? Do you have questions about LinkedIn? Do you want to take your company international? But it's actually turned into a great friendship. And also, I was on your show Monday. I lose track of time. When was I? Last Friday.
I can't remember. The days blur together when I'm not going out or traveling. So you were delightful talking about global marketing. It's the Global Marketing Show podcast. Yeah, I love talking to you.
And so I'm so psyched to have you here today because we're going to talk about international business. And I think in the time of COVID, there's a lot more people who are able to create business across the world. Yeah. But that comes with it its own set of problems, like how do we engage with folks of different cultures and different languages? So before we get officially started, let me introduce my friend Wendy, who is passionate about connecting people across languages and cultures. She's the president of Rapport International, not Report, Rapport International, which is a services company that specializes in guiding people on the best ways to communicate across more than 200 languages. That's nuts. 200 languages that you offer. And prior to this, you've had that corporate background. You've got your MBA from Dartmouth, your BA in foreign service. That's cool too, from Penn State. You speak and write on language, culture, marketing, HR, entrepreneurship, and exporting. And you've lived all over the place too, right? Mexico, Taiwan, the Philippines. So needless to say, Wendy is very passionate about language, culture, and communication. So I am super psyched to have you on today's call because, yeah, there are people. It's funny. I just had someone the other day reach out and ask if we wanted to do our program in other languages. And we've got more than half of our sales force lives in Colombia. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. We should definitely bring in Spanish. But yeah, how do you do that? And especially with people who are starting to do business all over the world, how do we do it? How do we end up marketing and doing business and selling and engaging with all of these different countries and all these different cultures?
You put a process around it. You develop a strategy and you put a process around it. It's the same thing as if you're starting any business initiative. And that's what we really talk to people about when they call in and say, where do I start? It's the first question is, well, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
So that's where you start.
Now, you and I were talking earlier, and you mentioned this thing called an accidental exporter, and I think that's COVID-based. What is an accidental exporter?
Yeah, it's actually started a little bit before COVID, but now people really can capitalize on it. An accidental exporter is somebody that has a product or service that can be sold internationally, and Google is the #1 search engine around the world. So if you're putting your website out there and you're optimizing it at all, or you've got something that people want, they're going to find you. And what happens is all of a sudden a company in the US might say, well, for example, we had a client, they called us and they said, look, we're getting these inquiries from Germany.
Yeah.
We're just doing English language marketing, but we're seeing this and their language skills aren't that great. So we're wondering, should we translate our website into German? So we worked with them, and doing their whole site didn't make sense because they didn't sell all their products. It wouldn't have made sense.
It wouldn't make sense. Yeah. If they only want oranges, you don't have to translate apples into German.
Exactly. And we see that a lot with people saying, well, we need our website translated. Well, no, you don't. Let's look at your strategy and what you're doing and what would make sense. So they picked off the parts that they actually wanted, just did that in German, and they increased the amount of business they were getting in.
And for a product, like I think about what we would have to do, because we're a training company. So if we have to translate not only, aspects of our websites, but all of our training too, that and into more than one other language, that would be like crazy. But I guess if you've got a product based or even a service based business, it would absolutely make sense to start creating at least landing pages in different languages.
Well, let's look at your company and your training. You're going, oh, that's crazy. Well, if you figure that less than 5% of the world's population is in the United States, you've got a massive world out there that wants your training, because people all over the world are using LinkedIn. So talk to me. Why does it seem so prohibitive to do it in other languages?
Because it was really prohibitive to do it in English. That's so much work just to create the 3 programs we have in English. So then I'm thinking, okay, so now we have to redo all our decks. We have to find someone who speaks that language, because I sure don't. My French, as we learned in our podcast, my French is minimum.
You came up with a lot of good French in that podcast.
I can swear. But, we do have our Spanish speaking contingent certainly in the company. So that would be the natural next language if we were going to go into another language. But then we have to train them on how to train too, because it's not just deliver the content, it's deliver the content well and understand all the nuances. And, so I'm just like,
no. So all your training is done live? There's no automated training?
It's a hybrid. So we've got fully automated for individuals coming in, individual entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, sellers, etc. So they can come in and do completely online. And so that would be a little bit easier, although we still would have to find someone to deliver. But then for our big corporate training, it's a hybrid of online and then live training and then live coaching. And it's extensive. It's a 15-week program. So that's a lot of language.
It is, but you think about it. So here we are, you're at the whole website. It seems overwhelming. But if you think about just carving off the stuff that is more automated for the solopreneur or the small business owner, most of that is automated. So you take that and put subtitles on it. So you just, you get one of those, you get like dev.com to download the text, you edit it with what you need, you do the translation, and then you add the subtitles on the bottom of it and you market it. And you've just expanded your market huge.
Mario, are you listening? So I guess we're going to throw it into Google Translate, right?
Ouch, you're killing me. You want to tarnish your brand? Do you want to cause problems? Do you want to have people asking for their money back because it's just crappy translation? No. And don't put the Google plugin on your website. Oh my gosh, don't get me started.
I do want to get you started, because a lot of people, and I told this story on your podcast, how I was speaking in Norway. And so I thought, won't it be cool? Because on LinkedIn, you can create your profile into a bunch of different languages. So I'm like, I'll just change my company I'll just change my profile into Norwegian. And of course, what did I use? I used Google Translate. And it was so funny because the Norwegians are very, very polite. And so, it was painful, but I actually had 2 or 3 people come up to me and explain that the translation of my profile was horrendous. So that a word of warning: if you are going to translate your LinkedIn profile, your product, your service, or your company page, don't use Google Translate. So talk a little bit more about some of the stories that you've heard around Google Translate and why isn't it good and why don't we want to use the plugin?
Well, there's all sorts of branding and marketing things, and you can go to our website. I think you can put the link in the chat room about Google Translate and the problems with it.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's streaming right under there. So you can go there and you can get more details. But one of my favorites is I love Mazdas. I love their cars. I drive one, and their tagline in Japan was "Jinba Ite."
Uh-huh.
And what that captures is the Japanese horse archery rider flying across the field, one with the horse. And you know how you just driving and you got that feeling. And when I heard that, I put it into Google Translate and it translated into danger.
Oh,
I thought, well, is that the tagline a car company really wants is danger? Yeah. Now somebody's given them feedback because now it comes up Jinba, which means nothing. So right. Google, there are thousands of words in a language, and I actually have a dictionary from the 1930s, and it's really thin. But if you look at today's dictionary, it's full, and they add thousands of words each quarter.
Wow.
Like Zoom fatigue. And, there's all these words that are coming up now that a year ago we had never even heard of. So they'll add those in and then they take words out. So Google can never keep up with that. Plus they can't get the cultural meaning behind things. Yeah. So if it's emotion or culture or colloquialisms or slang or humor, it's just going to miss. Yeah. And plus 100%. There's all sorts of grammar things that we do, like whether the adjective and the noun go first or second, that can vary. Yeah. And if you have a complex sentence, it can't do it. So we post all the time. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you just search for Wendy Pease, translation expert. I post something fun every day about language and culture. So if you want to learn more, there you go. The streaming's coming up now.
Andre and I were trying to hit it at the same time. Andre's back in the background helping us out. And I should just I'm going to keep my hands off the keyboard and let you do your job, Andre. Thank you.
I can see you laughing and it coming and going. So yeah, but I'm easy to find if you know Wendy Pease. So what? I don't get to laugh with you. You make my day.
So what? Yeah, localize. Exactly, Delphin. How do you? Hey, Delphin, how you doing? It's good to see you. Delphin worked with us for a long time, so he totally understands about all the different languages.
Delphin is from the U.S., not the U.K., right?
No, Delphin's from the U.K. Well, actually, Delphin, you're in. I know you're in Finland. I think Finland.
Oh, right. Because I got my spelling off because we spell localize with a Z here in the U.S. and S is over in Europe. I was mixing
in Europe, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good to see you. Okay, so what do you do if your lead doesn't speak your language? So you wanna engage with a prospect. They found you. They found your product. They found your service. They don't speak the language. What do they do? What do we do?
Yeah, so, I'll tell another story here. We had a client call up and say, we're getting these emails from China and they want our service, and they happen to provide high-end research on what consumer electronic products were being bought across all modalities, because then that would drive production of what kind of consumer electronics the manufacturers would make and sell. Yeah. And he says, I want to respond to these emails so I can get the business. And I said, well, replying by email, you're going to have that translation cost every time it goes, and you're going to incur a minimum charge, which is $95 for us, which is cheap in the industry. Right. I said, think about those questions that you're getting over email, because if you look at Marcus Sheridan's book, he does one on They Ask, You Answer. Yeah. There's basically 5 categories or 5 questions that people ask. So we said, think through the questions and then create a landing page on your website So it explains what you do, answers the most common questions, and gives them the opportunity. In his case, they could sign up for it without having the interaction.
Yeah.
So that was one simple way. He's like, oh, that's a great idea. So he ended up doing it in 3 or 5 different languages to target different markets.
Oh, that's
so then,
and again, you don't have to do the whole website. You just have the one FAQ on your landing page in the different languages. But how do, and I know you were going to say something else, but how do people find the right language on the right website? Are there plugins for IP addresses, or how does all that work?
Yeah, so there are href tags for language and country, and then you start getting into pretty technical when you're getting in here, because you have to know whether you're going to globalize something and you want to do it by language.
Yeah.
And this is a good place to start. You can put it in for the language. So then if somebody is Chinese speaking in the US or China or Taiwan or Singapore or wherever they are, their IP is pointing them to the right language. Now, if you start to localize with a Z or an S, and you want it to be country specific, like if you have a consumer product like Nike, what they're selling here in the United States is going to be different than Peru, which is going to be different than Nigeria. So they're going to use the href country tag, so it pulls up your IP and tells what country you're looking for. Now, let me add on here, the big mistake I see with companies is if they do that and they assume technology is going to point you to the right place.
Right.
Now, say you're back in Norway and you decide to shop, so you get your new running shoes when you get home, and it picks up your IP from the hotel you're staying at and gives you in Norwegian. If you don't have a language selector on that website, you're not going to be able to shop.
Exactly. I have done that before.
You've done that.
And you nailed it. It was shoe shopping.
That was just an example. All right.
I want to say when we evacuated, I got, you learn what's important for you when you have to evacuate for a fire, which was just like last week. And I put Imelda Marcos to shame. I mean, it's not something I'm proud of. It's just something that's true. But I was very proud of myself. I only took 3 pairs of boots.
That's impressive.
Boots. I took my John Fluvog boots, and I took a pair of White House Black Market boots, and I left all the other shoes.
So you took all like fancy boots.
Well, yeah, but they were very, very expensive. But also
you didn't want to lose them. It's not that you're wearing them during the evacuation.
No.
They were highly valued items.
Priority, as well as family photos and things like that. So,
So wait, let me just finish that before we jump on to what Adam says, because this is a good point. Yeah, even if you have your IP href tags all set up, you still want to have a language selector with a globe on the top right-hand side. That's custom, that's standard. That's where people are going to look. And then translate your languages. Because if you go in to a Chinese site and it has English and Chinese, you can't pick it.
Right. Oh my gosh, duh. That's good
These
point.
are things I see all the time.
Yeah. No, that's a really, really good point. Yeah. Okay.
Adam, come back.
We both are like, I should just let her do her job. All right. Adam Legraldi, who's like one of our faves. He says that although English is considered today's universal language, it's great to personalize your profile with different languages to make yourself approachable. And we actually, Adam, I think we're going to make a little package of this live and then the podcast, Wendy, that you and I did, because I spent an enormous amount of time talking about that. But you definitely want to, here, I'll let the expert answer. How do you translate not technically, but what is the best approach to translating your profile?
Right. Yeah. So you covered that really well when I interviewed you on the global marketing show podcast. So it's worth going to check that out, because we talk about not only your individual, but your business website. And you can pick it. And I think the biggest thing there was, don't translate it unless you actually speak the language, because, or can muddle through the language, because you're going to get interaction in those other languages. But Adam, I want to talk to you about, although English is considered today's universal language, there's another podcast interview with Randy Rogers, who is a product manager who was managing products all over the world. And she talks about it on there. If you want to really insult people, just assume they can speak English. And so, as English speakers, we may kid ourselves and say it's the universal language, but in surveys, 90% of people would rather be on their native language. Over 70% are going to spend more time, and over 50% will spend more money if the content is translated.
So how do they, so I want to translate my profile to Norwegian. Obviously, I know I don't want to use Google Translate. How do I go about that? Because I'm not a native Norwegian speaker. How do I find someone to help me translate my profile or website?
Yeah, and it depends on what you're having translated and the quality that you want. So there's everything from really bad but quick and free to Google Translate, to coming to an agency like ours that's going to make sure your translation is high quality and that it's culturally adapted. So we have examples of original content that would have offended or not worked in or not made sense.
And I
think not made sense or offended.
Yeah.
And then we'll serve
on LinkedIn. You are, okay, Facebook, go use Google Translate, whatevs. But on LinkedIn, you want to be as professional as possible, and the last thing you want to do is offend. So yeah, I think it would be worth the investment. And really, what is it? We're talking like probably a total of 4,000 to 6,000 characters that need to be translated for, your headline, your current experience, and your about page. So it won't be prohibitively expensive, I'm guessing. And what a way to look most professional, I think. Yeah.
No, it's worth it. And then you also have to be careful of some agencies, because I know some crowdsource, and then your content is plastered all over the website, and you never know who you're going to get.
Yeah.
So we actually do linguistic matchmaking, which might not be as important for a LinkedIn profile, but if you're running a marketing department and you take all that time to develop a marketing message, and you want consistency of voice and messages and words, you want to have that same translator working on it, so you get that consistency of voice across your languages and your materials.
Yeah, no, 100%. We were talking about on the podcast too. I did a LinkedIn training for a Chinese corporation, and they were, the business itself was to help Chinese infiltrate's the wrong word, but access the American market, and integrate. And even their website had language problems. Never mind most of the folks, the LinkedIn profile. So, and Charlie brought that up. Go ahead and pop that one, Andre, that you just asked, that Charlie just asked. What is the language that gets that you get the most requests for translation?
Yeah. So this question is, these questions are really interesting. They give me a lot to talk about. Translation is written. And Mandarin is a spoken dialect. So translation is written, interpretation is spoken. Simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese are written, and there's Mandarin and Cantonese and a whole bunch of different spoken dialects.
So if it's written, the Mandarin, the Cantonese, they can all understand it, but they speak it. I had no idea. So the
spoken is very different, but the written, there's only two forms. So simplified or traditional, and here's a quick history lesson, is when Mao Zedong closed down the borders, and he said, we're going to teach the masses to read and write. only China uses simplified Chinese,
Wow.
and the rest of the Chinese-speaking world uses traditional Chinese. So if we're doing Chinese translation for people in the United States, we have to ask how old they are, because if they're older, they probably came over before the wall, the wall came down, but that's not appropriate, before, the borders open.
Yeah.
And if it's a younger Chinese topic and audience, then we use simplified. So then, our first question is
how old are you?
It's going to be you. Pardon?
Your question is how old are you, or how old is your audience?
Yes. Yeah. But that's not answering the question that Charlie asked. I think he's asking, what do we see most commonly?
Right.
There's about a dozen languages that we see most commonly. Simplified and traditional Chinese. We have Vietnamese and Korean. We've got Russian, and then Spanish, French, German, Portuguese. So it's the ones you commonly know. There's 6,000 languages in the world, and we're losing them because as TV and the internet expands its reach, people they might learn their native language, but they're having to learn the local predominant language to be able to function in school and work.
That is so sad to me. Another thing you might not know about me is I got my master's, I kind of joke, in religion and culture, but I say I got my master's in Native American women's autobiography. But when I was living on the reservations, on the reses with some of my French / subjects, that was the thing. Like the language, the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, would not let the Native American children speak their native languages. And so in the 40s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, they were not allowed to speak their native languages. They would get whipped, they would get beaten. Many of these children in Canada and the US got pulled away from their communities and were brought to American schools, and they would get whipped, beaten, their hair cut off, it was torturous.
Why would they not let them learn their native language?
Because they didn't want, do we have another hour? There's a couple different reasons. The nefarious reasons that you can control someone if you don't allow them. If you control their language, you can control them. The other one was they thought, if the more altruistic was, they'll feel better. They'll feel better if they can integrate more into the U.S. or the American or English society. But also, language, as you know, is so tied into religion or spirituality, and so they were. I mean, I need another 4 hours and my soapbox, but anyway, it was to control. It was basically.
So that was the U.S. federal government that was
Bureau of
controlling
Indian it. And the Canadian government was no better. And so anyway, when I was in the 80s, when I was doing my master's, 90s, when I was doing, making myself too old here. In the 90s, when I was doing my master's, one of the things that they were doing was reintroducing the language to the communities. And so when you said that about, asking how old you are, and your language is going to be different depending on how old you are, the older, and they were dying out, but the older traditionals within the cultures were beginning to bring the language back and teach the children, the new children, the languages, because there was a whole, from the 50s to the 90s, there was 40 years where they were not allowed to speak their languages.
You know what is absolutely crazy to me is your brain is programmed to learn new languages from about birth to 7. You might be pushing it. In the US, we typically don't expose people to language till middle school. And there's all this research that's showing that if you speak 2 languages, your brain functions much higher.
Yeah. All my European cousins speak 3, 4, 5, 6 languages, like all of them. I speak English and barely French. Yeah, it's insanity that we don't bring other languages into our preschools.
Yeah.
And even my dad's first generation Swede, and they started teaching me Swedish. And, I got frustrated because I'd ask for milk in Swedish and my mom wouldn't understand. And so they stopped teaching me. And I'm like, no!
Oh, no.
How awesome would it be if I could do more than swear in Swedish? So.
Oh, no, it's so hard. It's so hard because people are going to default into what is the easiest language. But, keep learning. Even if you're headed towards retirement, keep learning because it triggers those synapses to fight Alzheimer's or dementia.
Well, what's your favorite? So that's and we're actually over time, but I'll ask one last question, then let you say anything more that you want to say. But what's your favorite language app to teach languages?
Or do you? I haven't been asked that in a while.
Yeah.
It depends on what you want to do. If you want to sit at a computer, there's some. If you want to listen on an app as you're walking, there's Spanish, news in slow Spanish and news in slow French. There's online programs that you connect with people that you can have relationships with and just talk in a language. So it really depends on what you want, but go search them. We don't get into the area of teaching too much. So I just kind of follow.
Yeah. I've been, so I downloaded Boozoo, and that was my New Year's resolution. I was going to get French down, and then I was going to learn Spanish too, because we're thinking, potentially moving out of the U.S. at some point. And so that's a whole other conversation.
Yes, it is.
But I love that. Okay. News in slow. So they speak it more slowly. So you can listen to the news in French or in Spanish or in Mandarin or in Chinese or Mandarin or whatever. That's so cool. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah. And I'll turn on, one of my favorite things to do is during the Olympics, I'll turn on the Spanish speaking TV and listen to that and then watch how the commercials have been adapted for the Spanish speaking market here in the US, which is huge.
That's cool. That is a good idea. And the other trick I heard was show kids TV, they can watch their cartoons, but then I can't remember if it was turn off the noise and only have the Spanish subtitles or have it in English and Spanish. But anyway, because children's brains are so elastic, they could pick up, they could read it. I think it was read in English, listen in the other language. And they were actually picking up Spanish that way. I thought that was a good idea.
I'd actually just put them on the Telemundo or Univision and have them
exactly
in Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's so cool.
So, but a couple of things I want to mention before we go, because I know we're running out of time, is next week, Softland Partners has a 24-hour conference that's global. So if you go there, you can register it, and it's people that will help you expand internationally. There's connections from all over the world. They have 14 different meetups that meet monthly. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is I host a global speed networking for anybody with a global mindset. That's the last Friday of every month. So if you're interested, connect with me on LinkedIn and, I can send you the sign up link for that.
That's awesome. I think we have it down below. Rapport translations.
Oh, you do. Speed networking.
But also to connect with Wendy, and we'll pop her link up here again. That's so cool. No, I love learning new things. And I know we have a lot of, sales professionals on the call, and I love that. And I love to learn more about sales, and that's awesome. But this was new for me. And so I really enjoyed today's session. Thank you so much, Wendy.
If you have a lot of salespeople on here, I'm actually looking for an account manager to develop relationships and new businesses. So, yeah.
Excellent. I love it. Okay, so if you are looking for a sales position, also reach out to Wendy.
Thank you.
More than one language.
Yeah. Actually, you can speak English for this position, but you have to love languages and cultures and accents.
Oh my gosh, I think that is so cool. That sounds like an awesome opportunity for someone out there. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you on today's call. Next week, we have my friend Doreen coming in from Social Media Pros. So definitely join us. I'm hoping my internet will work. I will be in South Carolina, which is Oh my God. And then we can get into the whole Southern language. Bless your precious heart. Clutch my pearls. Right? That's a whole
Y'all, y'all, you
all
say
y'all.
all y'all.
All y'all. So hopefully we will see you all back here, same time, same place next week. Thank you again, Wendy. Any final words of wisdom?
Oh, I love talking to you. We got to schedule another call. Can we be on a panel? Who wants to record us on their podcast?
We'll come in together. We'll talk. Oh my gosh, yeah. So invite both Wendy and I to be on your podcast, and I'll talk about the technical things that you can do on LinkedIn with language, and then Wendy will talk about the what's the word I'm looking for? See, what's the word I'm looking for, Wendy?
Or the translation, or the cultural adaptation. You do technical words. Technical practical. There you go.
Wendy will be practical. I'll be technical, and we'll be on your next web podcast together.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Everybody else have a great weekend. See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.